Sonic Boom and Sonic Movie Crossover Book 2, Smaller but Mightier. The villagers of Hedgehog Village were abuzz with gossip. They had heard that an alternate universe version of Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails had appeared on the island yesterday, and that the universe that they had come from had enough differences to this one that reality was completely stable having them here and that there was no incoming universal collapse. Yay! At this point, only the members of Team Sonic had actually seen and interacted with them, but today they were going to be coming into the village and having a meal at Milberger. Basically, the entire village had gathered in the Milberger, much to Dave the intern's annoyance, who was constantly being called over for any minor inconvenience or need the customers had, but at least he got to hear the most gossip and speculation from the other villages.
Team Sonic were never the secretive when we had other dimensional visits before. There must be something terribly wrong.
Lady Goat bladed her sentence out.
Maybe they were villains.
Belinda excitedly suggested to Charlie, who was in his match as almost he always was.
But if they live on a floating island in the sky and are taking time to adjust to being on the ground because they've never been down before.
Dave rolled his eyes. They were starting to sound like that crazy badger on Team Sonic. The last thing Dave wanted was more sticks running around. He was quite glad that her counterpart was not here. And so the morning went. Everyone swapping theories and Dave continuing to grudgingly move between the tables, occasionally picking up snippets of conversations.
That is completely ridiculous, Mayor. There's no way they are going to be famous skateboard riders.
Soar the Anchorbirds' loud reporter voice cut through the rest of the chatter.
There they are.
It was either Percy or Stacy who spoke. Dave didn't care enough to pay attention right now. He, along with everyone else, was too focused on the visitors Team Sonic had brought along and who would be proven right about the counterparts. But none of them had predicted what they saw. They were Tinny, the tallest of the familiar yet unfamiliar trio. A red echino who had to be Knuckles walked with a tense stance and puffed up quills, his eyes darting around the village as if expecting an attack. Not that he was wrong to, with Egan around his serious expression contrasting the familiar Knuckles' goofy one, but yet he didn't even pass the Tails they knew and hate. The new Sonic was hard to tell his exact height because he kept zipping away every few seconds to get a look at anything he considered even slightly interesting, then zip back to the other two new one side. He seemed to basically be waist-high to the familiar Sonic. And lastly, the one who was clearly Tails was nervously fiddling with something. No one could tell what it was, but watching Emmy and their Tails, who could use this new Tails head as an armrest comfortably, try and fail to confiscate it was certainly entertaining. He also had a backpack on. It probably held his inventions if he was anything like their Tails. There was silence for a while as they studied each other. Fortunately, Sonic broke it rather quickly.
Hey everyone, these are our dimensional counterparts. I would do introductions, but you technically already know them.
Before anyone could say anything, little Sonic dashed over to Charla with his Tails and Knuckles following soon after.
Oh my gosh, you have a mech suit. This is one of the coolest days ever.
The small Sonic, who sounded quite different and very much like a young kid, zipped around the mech suit looking at it from every possible angle, the expression of glee never leaving his face. The Tails came up to him with a bit more anxiety, his twin tails swishing behind him.
Excuse me, Mr. Mech-Suit Man, I have a few questions I'd ask.
He sounded almost identical to the Tails they knew, but younger. He had some kind of device in his hands that he was fiddling with, but before Charlie could say a thing, Belinda answered for him.
Go ahead, sweetie. It's good to know someone is interested in our work.
Tails' face lit up instantly, too excited to notice her deceptive tone.
Great. I only have a few questions, won't take long. What its power source? How does? Did you build it? If not, I did. When did?
The boy kept going, asking question after question and barely gave time for answers. The Knuckles was the hardest to understand. Charlie could barely believe that this little guy was his worst enemy's counterpart. He hadn't said anything yet, so it was hard to tell how different they really were. Unlike the other two, he did not get caught up in the excitement of the match, stood instead staring at it with a hard-to-decipher expression. Was it anger? Fear? Was that some wonder in his eyes there? No one could really tell. He just continued to stare at the match with the mixed expression, seeming to tense if the sharp claw hand got close to Tails or Sonic. The small Sonic dashed from person to person excitedly. It was then when Comedy Chimp made the mistake.
Gee, some kids gotta learn when to shut up. I haven't had that many questions since the last scandal of the mayor's. And what about the blue one? His attention span's so short you'd think he was a goldfish.
No one had a chance to laugh. A crackling noise cut them short. Everyone in the Mayberger could feel electricity in the air. A growling-like sound was heard, and everyone turned to the source. It was the smaller Knuckles, who was standing there with his emotions no longer ambiguous. That was definitely anger, and all of it was directed at Comedy Chimp. But what had spooked everyone the most was that the electricity they felt was coming from Knuckles himself. All his ghouls were lit up, a brightly and red electricity arced into the surrounding area. Then without warning he leaped forwards, pinning Comedy Chimp to the fence around Mayberger, who was somehow soaked with mucky water and tied up before Knuckles had even reached him.
How dare you speak such cruel insults towards my brothers? Have you no honor?
His voice was downright venomous and clearly seething with anger.
My brothers are the bravest and most noble people I know. You have no right to speak of them that way. I will show you mercy today. But if you ever speak of my tribe again, you will be answering to me. And I do not take infractions towards my tribe lightly.
With that, he released Comedy Chimp, walked back to where his Sonic and Tails were, who were apparently his brothers. If anyone had been paying attention, they would have noticed the other Tails grabbing some kind of device or weapon out of his backpack, pointing it directly at Comedy Chimp and firing. The projectile hit Comedy Chimp and restrained him seconds before Knuckles had struck. Tails had quickly put the device back in his backpack and put on the most innocent expression he could. If anyone had been quick enough, they would have seen the other Sonic run off, find a bucket, fill it with dishwater from the Mayberger sink, dump it on Comedy Chimp, put the bucket back and return to his spot. Granted, this all happened within the span of a second, so missing it was quite understandable.
I'm sorry, but what the heck was that?
The familiar Sonic was clearly freaked out and afraid to touch the Echidna, edging backward as he approached.
What was what?
The small Knuckles looked over at him and now had a stoic expression on his face.
That weird lighting thing you did.
The familiar Tails was pointing some kind of equipment at the small Knuckles, who stepped back and looked at it in annoyance.
Oh, this our power.
To demonstrate his point, little Sonic lit up his own quills and blue electricity danced harmlessly between his fingers. Behind him, Tails had a fainter but still seen yellow electricity arc between his namesake.
It kind of gets all weird when we get emotional.
No one had much of an idea of what to say. They were all still shaken by Knuckles' show of power.
All right, everyone, let's all calm down and just order something.
Emmy thankfully chose to play peacemaker and go order something for the group. Team Sonic then lead the visitors over to the empty table at the center of Mayberger. Small Knuckles was about to sit down when Small Sonic zipped over and took the seat before he could, with a cheeky grin.
That is my spot.
I don't see you sitting in it.
That does not matter, Mog.
Oh, they're defiantly siblings.
No doubt.
Percy and Stacy exchanged, recalling many of their disagreements. The younger Sonic and Knuckles continued bickering until Sonic blew a raspberry at Knuckles, and that was the last straw. Wordlessly, Knuckles picked up the chair Sonic was sitting in, tipped Sonic out of it and sat down.
My cheek.
Knuckles' tongue made it clear that he was done with conversation, but clearly Sonic was not done being annoying and decided to be annoyance for his Tails. Zipping over, he leaned on Tails.
Sonic, stop! You're squishing me!
Tails was pushing back against Sonic as he leaned on him more and more.
Nope, not me. It's all gravity's fault.
Oh, I'll show you gravity!
And tried to reach for something in his backpack. At that, Sonic's eyes in fear and imitatively stopped and dashed over to the empty seat.
No, I'm sorry, please don't use that. I don't want to visit the moon.
That just adds even more questions to the hundreds the villagers already had. The village had only known them for less than 10 minutes, but it was clear that however long they were going to be staying was going to be poor trouble.